Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says any deal must deny Iran a path to a nuclear weapon.
A bad deal is worse than no deal. We need a good deal.
At the JNS International Policy Summit, Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer noted President Trump pulled out of the previous nuclear deal with Iran signed by President Obama called the JCPOA.
And I have a lot of confidence that President Trump would walk away from a bad deal today, just as he walked away from a bad deal then. And I think he's been very clear. Iran's never going to have a nuclear weapon.
America's new ambassador to Israel told the conference Monday that if Iran doesn't abandon its quest for nuclear weapons, President Trump, quote, won't be dragged into a war, he'll lead it.
I think the president has been as clear as any political figure in history in saying that if they don't, there will be no holding back. And those are his words, those are his policies.
Ambassador Huckabee also spoke of the evil Hamas committed on October 7th when it invaded Israel and brutalized, tortured, and slaughtered pregnant women, babies, the elderly, and the disabled.
Who does that? People who are evil, that's who. This is a vertical battle between heaven and hell, between good and evil. The United States of America and President Trump stands for good and not evil, and that's why he has made it very clear that Hamas has no future in Gaza or anywhere else on this earth.
Some still argue permanent peace in the Middle East can be achieved through the so-called two-state solution, carving a Palestinian state out of Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland of Israel.
The idea is folly, nothing more than folly. We just tried a Palestinian state in Gaza. You saw what that brought, right?
In Gaza, he insisted not only must Hamas go, but the Palestinian Authority can't take over.
Why replace one regime that is sworn to our destruction with another regime that is sworn to our destruction?
As for handing Judea and Samaria to the Palestinian Authority, Huckabee pointed out that God gave the Jews that land long, long ago.
Israel is a chosen place for a chosen people, for a chosen purpose. And I say that not because I'm Jewish, I say it because it's true. And I affirm that which has been the truth for 3,500 years. This is his land.
And he still guards it.
Because the only explanation for the creation and the survival and the victory of Israel is that God's hand is upon this land, and it always will be.
And Chris joins us now with more. So, Chris, how serious is this idea of taking land from Judea and Samaria and making a Palestinian state there? Has that plan gotten any traction among diplomats?
Well, Ephraim, among some diplomats it has. It's still advocated by the EU and the UN, the Arab League, also countries like Russia, China, the UK, France. But really, over here in Israel, Ephraim, it's really a non-starter, especially after October 7th. The majority of the people are opposing a two-state solution. The majority of the Knesset's actually passed a law about that. Certainly Benjamin Netanyahu, as you heard in our report, the current government, and even the Trump administration is not supporting a two-state solution. So while some people advocate it, it really seems to be a non-starter here, especially after Hamas committed what they did on October 7th. And also people recognize, as Prime Minister Netanyahu said in our report, that the Palestinian Authority is much the same, has the ideology as Hamas. And so that's why a two-state solution here in Israel is really not realistic.
Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer is expressing confidence President Trump will avoid a bad deal with Iran. But is there still widespread concern over the nuclear talks between Iran and the United States?
Ephraim, very deep concern. In fact, I interviewed a number of people at the JNS conference that we had those clips from Ambassador Huckabee, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and Strategic Minister Ron Dermer. The number one question I felt was, what is President Trump up to? What are these negotiations all about? Are they just giving negotiations one last chance? And also, if there was a deal, would Israel actually bomb Iran if the U.S. and Iran reach an agreement. And then the question is Israel and the White House on the same page? And finally, can Iran be trusted? Few, if any, believe over here that Iran is trustworthy, and most people feel Iran is really just simply talking while they're preparing offensively and defensively in case of any Israeli or U.S. attack, and offensively on their way to a nuclear bomb. So it's a very uncertain time, even though a few weeks ago it seemed like the U.S. and Israel were on the same page and a military campaign it was imminent. It's a very uncertain time, and a lot of questions here in Israel about what's happening with these negotiations.
You just returned from Italy. What is the significance of San Remo in the history of the modern state of Israel?
Well, it's the legal foundation for the modern state of Israel, Ephraim, and it ratified what's called the Balfour Declaration into international law. And the Balfour Declaration called for the reestablishment of a homeland for the Jewish people after 2,000 years. That's never been abrogated. It was ratified by the League of Nations in 1922. Later, the UN grandfathered all these ratified these treaties by the League of Nations into the UN, and it counters the accusations that Israel is an occupier or a colonialist. Israel was given the land from the river to the sea by the San Remo resolution that was ratified by the League of Nations and the UN.
Why do some believe the next 6 months will be decisive for Israel?
Well, first of all, many people are expecting the end of the war in Gaza and hopefully the return of all the hostages. There seems to be a willingness right soon that Israel will actually increase its military campaign to bring the war in Gaza to an end. Also, probably in the next 6 months, somehow, the Iran nuclear program will be dealt with either by perhaps a diplomatic agreement that would eliminate their nuclear program or by a military campaign. Many people are also looking forward to normalizations of Middle East countries with Israel. Number one among them would be Saudi Arabia, but others as well. But to do all that, as Ron Dermer said last night, victory will be essential over Gaza, over Hamas inside Gaza to make all these other things happen.
Before we let you go, what do you have for us on Jerusalem Dateline this evening?
Well, we have updates on the latest things that are happening here. Also a story on Israelis and U.S. veterans dealing with PTSD. We also have a story on the anti-Israel bias among the BBC, but indicative of many other news media ever since October 7th happened. So these are some of the things will be happening. Today's on Jerusalem Dateline.
All right, thank you. Our CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell, we appreciate your insights. Looking forward to hearing from you more in the days ahead. Want to remind you at home, you can see the latest Jerusalem Dateline at 8 p.m. Eastern on the CBN News Channel. You can also watch it on the CBN News app, or you can find it on YouTube.